Oh boy, lots to unpack. Hey everyone, I'm Abbey Sharp. Welcome to Abby's Kitchen. Today's video is sponsored by Cerebral, and we'll be reviewing lifestyle and wellness content creator Hannah Adkins. But first, let me tell you about my sponsor, Cerebral. So I've been very open about my struggles with anxiety, insomnia, and mental health. And considering that 50% of the general population has a mental health condition, I know that I'm not alone. So I acknowledge that I have been super privileged to have been able to access therapists and doctors and other supporters when I need them. But I know how many of you message me to tell me that there are just too many financial, time, and stigma-related barriers to getting the help that you need. So I was really excited when I heard about Cerebral. So Cerebral is a mental health subscription that provides clients with ongoing comprehensive access to online care and medication management for anxiety, depression, and insomnia for a flat monthly rate. This is really your one-stop shop for all things mental health care. It's super convenient because they operate on your schedule where you can work out your calls or video visits in whenever it works for you. And it's way more affordable than typical therapy. They actually have 3 different plans depending on your needs. So if this sounds like it may be helpful for you or somebody that you care about, click the link down in the description to get started with Cerebral and access quality mental health treatment today for as low as $30 for your first month. Also, feel free to pause the screen or check out my description for a quick disclaimer, including a trigger warning for those with past or current experiences with disordered eating. As always, I'm talking nutrition, calories, macros, etc. So feel free to skip this video if it does not feel supportive to your journey. Now, just a quick recap on the subject of our video before we dive in. Hannah is a UK-based health, fitness, and lifestyle influencer, and a lot of you requested that I review her viral video titled How I Lost Fat, Toned Up, and Changed My Mindset, 5 Tips. So today we're going to be discussing my opinions on the tips that she gives in this video, along with some of the other content that I found on her various social platforms. All right, let's take a look at some of her weight loss tips.
There is more in your food than carbs, fat, and protein, aka your macros. I can't tell you how simplistic and problematic that approach is. You could eat a diet of almost entirely processed foods and still fulfill your macronutrient goals. But that is so far from a healthy, holistic, balanced approach.
Okay, so I don't disagree with Hannah here. I have said this multiple times that I think one of the dangers of the if it fits your macros approach is that it can really oversimplify eating to like a calculation that we don't actually have a whole lot of good evidence to support. We may have general macronutrient ranges or food group recommendations a la the food guide that are associated with good improved health, but it's also easy to cheat the system to choose nutrient poor foods. And I would say fiber and micronutrients are arguably even more important than macros in the quest for good health and satiety. So just as an example, if we were to compare a Big Mac from McDonald's with a whole wheat turkey veggie sandwich served with whole wheat crackers, cheese, and carrots, we're looking at about the same amount of calories and carbs, but a much more satiating and nutrient-dense meal when you go with the sandwich option. So while I don't really appreciate her overgeneralization and demonizing of the words processed foods, which I'm going to circle back on soon, we are definitely in agreement on her criticism of exclusive macro counting.
Is please educate yourself on the topic of nutrition. And I don't mean go and watch your favorite influencers Q&A. I'm not claiming to be an expert. I'm not an expert. Read books by experts, listen to podcasts, watch TED Talks.
Okay, lots to unpack here. First of all, I just have to say right off the bat that one of my least favorite lines in the wellness community is do your research. It's used a lot in anti-science communities as like a fear-mongering tactic, and that often makes people, often women, often mothers, feel that they're putting their family in danger for not seeking out alternative facts or truths that oppose mainstream science or health officials' recommendations. It can be really problematic. It also wrongly assumes that the layperson is capable of critically evaluating research or knowing who is in fact a credible source of information, which we actually know most people are just not. That's not me trying to be holier than thou. I'm just saying that, yeah, science is complicated stuff. So the source of that research is probably even more important than the research itself. Now, I was excited to hear Hannah recommend that we listen to actual experts about nutrition and not just follow what our favorite influencers are saying. But as I alluded to just a minute ago, what's missing here are some actionable tips on how to find said experts. And that's kind of important since there are a lot of folks on the internet who claim to be experts or professionals who are in fact not evidence-based. Case in point, some of the experts on Hannah's go-to list. So I want to just kind of go through them really super quickly here. Now, her first suggestion is Dr. Michael Greger, who is an influential player in the plant-based community as the best-selling author of How Not to Die and a doctor who is heavily involved in pro-vegan advocacy efforts. He's a physician, and obviously there's credibility there. And I do have faith that doctors, even though most are not really trained to know much about nutrition at all, should at least be fully capable of interpreting research and keeping up to date with the evidence in the field. So I do think that most doctors, including Greger, are credible sources for health information. And from what I've seen myself, Greger's content and recommendations are generally factually sound. However, no one is without bias, and Greger has been criticized for cherry-picking the data that he presents when discussing the risks of animal product consumption. He also obviously has a financial agenda to do this since he himself has a pro-vegan book that he's trying to sell. So again, I'm generally aligned with this recommendation, but I just want to point out that doctor doesn't always mean trustworthy, unbiased nutrition expert. Now, Hannah's next recommendation is Julia Enders, who's a German scientist and PhD student who studies microbiology and also very publicly discusses the importance of gut health. She honestly doesn't have a huge presence, which is probably a good thing. And seeing as I didn't find any big problematic red flags, I would say it's probably a pretty safe bet. But of course, if you know something that I don't know, please send. I'm happy to be proven wrong. Now, finally, Deliciously Ella is another one of her favorites, who's a very well-known plant-based cookbook author and internet personality. And while I love Ella's recipes, and honestly, I've used a ton of them in my own kitchen for some plant-based inspiration, I do want to point out that she doesn't have any qualifications in the field of nutrition. And this is kind of at odds with Hannah's advice to listen to the experts. Honestly, this to me just further solidifies how difficult it often is for most people to discern a credible source from a non-credible source, even when they think they're being super mindful of this. So if you're curious, here are some tips for determining whether or not a piece of information or source of information is credible. First of all, you want to look for authors who are willing to provide contradicting evidence, or at least to acknowledge when the research in the field is young or of poor quality. I also always look for articles that cite their sources, and you'll want to look for actual published peer review research as sources, not just blogs quoting blogs in an echo chamber. Obviously, you want to look for articles written by experts in the field, so qualifications like MD, PhD, or RD is a good place to start. And finally, be wary of articles that funnel you into a sales portal to buy a very specific product that supports the stance when the sponsorship or financial incentive isn't disclosed. Anyways, that was a lot, but let's move on.
But I cannot stress enough how much there is not a one-size-fits-all approach to exercise. You don't need to be doing HIIT 5 times a week. You can wake up in the morning and think, what do I feel like today? Some days that might be a walk. Some days that might be super high intensity training. Some days it might be gentle yoga. As long as you are keeping your body moving most days of the week, you're not gonna go wrong.
Okay, so Hannah is suggesting that in the past, she would do workouts that she actually really hated in order to just like tick off the box of working out. But it ended up just making her dread going to the gym and moving her body. She then suggests that by shifting her mindset around exercise to an act of self-love and pleasure, she was actually able to see better results. And this is absolutely how I feel about exercise as well. All movement is good movement. And as I discuss in detail in my video on joyful movement here, I am adamant that we really need to get out of the mentality that, hey, if I didn't sweat hard enough or get out of breath or keep my heart rate in the fat burning zone, then I didn't do anything today. No, you have to think about the long game. Fitness and nutrition are both long games. If you go too hard and too fast and you burn out, you're never going to improve your health long term. And research suggests that consistency is really the key with any health promoting habit. So I do recommend experimenting to find something that you actually enjoy and trying to incorporate it at a pace that feels sustainable to you.
I want to talk about substitutes. I personally don't buy anything that's labeled low fat, light, diet. The chemicals that they have added into that food so that it still tastes good without the sugar or without the fat are doing you so much more harm than the sugar or the fat.
Okay, so lots to say about this. So for the most part, I am in agreement that when you swap out a food that you love for a diet version, you often end up eating around your craving on what I like to call the satisfaction hunt. More time than not, this results in overeating. I mean, I talk about it all the time. You want the Oreo, so you eat the fruit salad, then the rice cakes, then the fat-free pudding, then the granola bar, and then you binge on a whole box of Oreos. But had you just allowed yourself a mindful portion of the cookie that you really craved, you probably would end up taking in a lot fewer calories and could just kind of move on with the rest of your life without investing so much time and mental energy on the hunt. Now, specific to Hannah's discussion on light, aka low fat or low sugar versions of regular foods, it is true that most of the time, food manufacturers have to replace a desirable substance that they're taking out with something else. So sometimes this makes the food actually less satisfying because it just doesn't taste as good. And other times, it also makes it less physically satiating as well. So consider for a second light or lower fat peanut butter as an example. When we take out some of that fat, we need to replace it with sugar and or salt. The calories actually are hardly impacted, but now we've got a spread that doesn't even keep us as full for as long and also doesn't taste as good. So in those cases, I definitely say go with the real deal, or at least go with whatever feels more delicious and satisfying to you. But it's also worth just flagging that Hannah's rationale for this is not so much about the satisfaction or satiety factors, but that there are apparently chemicals added into these diet foods that are far worse than actual sugar or fat. So yeah, let's unpack. Now, I get that by chemicals, Hannah probably means additives and preservatives, which is not untrue. So a lot of lower fat products need extra stabilizers or gums added to them to give them the same stability and mouthfeel that we would enjoy from actual fat. But it's important to note that the word chemicals sounds way scarier than it actually is. And food ingredient fear-mongering is literally one of my biggest pet peeves of life. Folks, everything we eat is made out of chemicals. So for example, did you know that the chemical cholecalciferol is found lurking in a wide range of packaged processed foods? Sounds pretty scary, right? Well, this chemical is actually just vitamin D3. And yeah, that fortification is helping a lot of us get our daily fix without the risk of skin cancer from excess sun exposure. My point here is just to say that demonizing the word chemicals is counterproductive to helping people feel at ease with making less diety food choices in their day. This is what happens when we trade diet culture with wellness culture, which is arguably even more pervasive and problematic. But anyways, that is a TED Talk for another day. Let's see what else she has to say.
Let me tell you about my kind of substitutes. Lentil pasta, pea pasta, chickpea pasta, rye bread instead of white bread, dark chocolate. They're my kind of substitutes. The nutritional value and the micronutrients in those substitutes are far better than in the kind of more processed alternatives.
Okay, so Hannah says she likes to replace some of her favorite food choices with more nutrient-dense swaps, like trading in a bean-based pasta for white pasta, whole grain bread for white bread, and a dark chocolate for milk chocolate. And these choices sound great to me as long as they are enjoyable to her. But how healthy these healthy swaps are ultimately comes down to intention to me. If you're choosing dark chocolate because it feels good to you, amazing. You go get that dark chocolate queen. I say enjoy the physical and emotional satisfaction that you get from making that choice. And in Hannah's case, it does sound like she still enjoys a good dark chocolate or bean-based pasta and is also motivated by the added nutrition in these, which I think is great. I also choose chickpea pasta all the time because I love the added fiber and protein on board to really keep me and my kiddos satisfied. And to me, it's just a really easy swap to make most of the time that doesn't trigger scarcity mentality, to me. But if you're choosing it out of food fear for the fake ingredients or chemicals in like a dairy milk bar, then I do think that you risk diet rebellion and potentially a binge later on.
Take more time to try and learn new recipes. Eating home cooked food is always going to be the best option if you're looking to manage your weight in some way. When you eat out, you have no idea what they've added into that food. So unless you're ordering from somewhere that's like an organic, it really is better to make your own food at home. Learning how to cook wholesome, nutritious food is honestly so key.
Okay, so obviously I'm a big believer in home cooking, so I do love this tip. I also love that Hannah is trying to encourage folks who maybe don't have the best track record or history with cooking, that it's just never too late to learn. Amen to that. And yes, research does show that restaurant food tends to be higher in calories, fat, saturated fat, and salt when compared with home cooked food. There's really no denying that. But I think it's really important that we don't stress ourselves out about this and let it interfere with our enjoyment of special social experiences. Fearing food that you don't prepare yourself is one of the big red flags of orthorexia. So I do think that improving our relationship with food requires tolerating some uncertainty around what is in our food or how it's being prepared. But I do want to comment on her suggestion that this isn't really a concern as long as the restaurant is an organic Whole Foods place. You do know that organic restaurants use a lot of sugar, salt, and fat too, right? And that organic maple syrup has just as many calories and as much sugar as non-organic white sugar, right? Organic also doesn't necessarily mean healthier. I mean, this is a big conversation and I have touched on it before in my Sorella Moore video right here, but unless your concern is specifically things like genetically modified oils, there's probably not a huge difference in the ingredients used or the nutrition content of the meals from an organic versus a non-organic restaurant. So yes, I don't disagree that we should aim to cook the majority of our meals ourselves at home, especially if calories are a concern, because we know that like cooking at home allows us to customize our meals to our diet needs, to focus on more appropriate portions for us, to limit waste, and to save money, which are all valid things in my books. But my take home here is that organics shouldn't get like a free pass. And when you do go out to enjoy a meal, enjoy it. Enjoy the food. Enjoy the experience. Stressing over what's hidden in the food that is bad for your health is what is actually bad for your health.
Please don't underestimate how important shifting your mindset and your mental well-being is. I've said this before in another video, but you cannot hate yourself healthy.
Okay, so I love the quote, you cannot hate yourself healthy. So remember what I said earlier. Health and wellness is all about the long game. It's really about figuring out which health promoting behaviors you can do for the rest of your life without making yourself unhappy. And science really does echo this sentiment. So research has found that non-stigmatizing, more supportive techniques are preferred and are more successful for promoting healthy behaviors over a typical tough love approach. So yeah, I say give yourself some grace and patience.
Is please listen to your body. You shouldn't try to outsmart, trick, or ignore your body. If you're hungry, please eat. That is your body telling you that you need fuel. If every single time you eat a meal, you're getting like really painful bloating, rather than punishing yourself, please see an expert and get their opinion.
Okay, so this is really good advice that I definitely agree with. And you know, I say it a lot. Listen to your body. But I will say that as I grow in this body neutrality, intuitive eating space, I also want to acknowledge that I know it can be really overly simplistic as well, and also probably not very helpful for a lot of folks who've been trapped in diet culture and restriction for so long. I also appreciate that a lot of people may just need more guidance and more structure, and saying just listen to your body might feel really stressful or even impossible for some folks. Some people may not know what feels good to their body after just like listening to external cues for just so long in their life. So if you're just getting started on listening to your body, but maybe you don't feel hunger, or you don't feel hunger until it's like an intense give me all the food experience, consider eating like a small meal every few hours to just encourage those cues to return. And I also agree that if you're experiencing digestive symptoms after every meal or snack, please definitely speak to a doctor before like self-diagnosing or cutting out a bunch of foods. This often can lead to food fears and also can potentially create digestive symptoms thanks to the intense interaction between our gut and brain. And if you hop right into eliminations without speaking to a professional first, it also can make it more difficult to rule out diseases like celiac, for example, since you need to actually be eating things like gluten to properly test for the condition. Anyways, I am glad to hear that Hannah has made some changes to help improve her relationship with her body and herself and food, and to start to shed some of her diet culture beliefs of her past. But before I close off, I do want to quickly touch on some other comments and messages that I came across while perusing her YouTube and social media channels. Now, according to an Instagram Q&A on her page, Hannah went fully plant-based in January 2020 for ethical reasons at first, but she soon found that it also made it easier for her to maintain her weight loss because she likes to eat big portions. And this does make sense, seeing as plant-based foods are naturally, typically higher in fiber and usually less calorically dense compared to animal-based products. So for example, putting together a 400-calorie salad of veggies and chickpeas is going to yield a significantly larger portion than 400 calories of steak with cheese. But ultimately, this comes down to satiety and satisfaction on a caloric deficit. I can think of a lot of calorically dense foods that are also vegan, like fries are vegan, candy's vegan, there are vegan cookies and burgers and ice creams and cakes and pizza, etc. So vegan doesn't necessarily mean low cal or volume dense. And on the flip side, being an omnivore doesn't mean you can't enjoy big portions of salad or fruit or high fiber whole grains or beans or other higher volume, lower calorie foods. Again, the key is sustainability. And if giving yourself a rule that you can't eat your beloved cheese triggers a scarcity mentality that leads you to plow through a pint of oat milk ice cream every single night, you're probably not going to lose weight. But if you naturally enjoy choosing those higher volume, higher fiber, plant-based foods, then of course, it's going to be easier for you to sustain and maintain, and therefore potentially to lose weight and keep it off. Now, I also watched a quick What I Eat in a Day video from Hannah's channel just to get a sense of how her advice plays out in her daily diet in real life. And to summarize, Hannah's day of eating is very similar to what she describes. So she has a vegan bacon sandwich for breakfast, avocado toast for lunch, and a portion of chickpea pasta with veggies for dinner. She also does a little haul of all of her favorite vegan snack foods, which all look totally delicious. So it is refreshing to see someone eat like a whole foods plant-based diet with some more convenience foods mixed in, which I just find feels more sustainable and accessible to most people watching from home. And while I did find her calories and protein intake was maybe a little bit lower than where I would personally want them, I get that she is on a weight management journey, and as such, she might just be used to eating in a more significant deficit. So in conclusion, I do agree with a lot of Hannah's sentiments in her viral weight loss video, particularly the take-home message to really appreciate and listen to your body and practice self-love. I do think it's worth doing a little bit more soul searching on her sentiments around chemicals and some of the more moralizing language that I heard here, and also maybe a little research herself on the experts that she chooses to trust. But I mean, we're all learning what feels best to our body, so it's possible that with a little bit more experimentation and data collection, that she may just find a place that better supports her mental and physical health. And ultimately, I do believe that her sentiments are coming from a really good place, and that her channel feels relatively benign in the context of the pseudoscience wellness YouTube community. So I do wish her lots of luck and support on the rest of her journey. And on that note, that is all that I have for you guys today, folks. Thank you again to Cerebral for sponsoring this video. If you liked it, be sure to give it the thumbs up. Leave me a comment below on who you'd like to see me review next. Subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time on Abby's Kitchen. Bye! And for more great videos like this, check out the links right here.